Now for a game which I found quite impressive between Hu Yifan and Alexandra Kosteniuk from the Women's World Championship in 2008. This game took place in the pawn structure when white pushes her pawn to d5 and then plays g4. And Kosteniuk managed to demonstrate a lot of black's main strategic ideas against that approach. The game began with a Ruy Lopez with the Marshall move order, and Hu Yifan played this slightly offbeat anti-Marshall c3, bishop g4, d3. So knight a5, bishop c2, and now c5, and after h3 the bishop dropped back to d7. We see from the game Leko Gustafsson that black needs to be careful with moves like bishop h5 when there isn't sufficient tension in the center. And after knight bd2, knight f1, and then either knight g3 directly or g4 followed by knight g3, that bishop is going to struggle to find a useful role. And if it takes on f3 at any point, then white will have a stable advantage with the two bishops. So the bishop retreated. White now played d4, queen c7, and yeah, overall you'd have to say that this looks like a relatively favourable type of Chigorin line. If we were to go back here and make the normal Chigorin moves. So if we were to look at that, which is a mainline position, and compare it to this, we see that it's the same position, but white's played this move a3 rather than knight bd2. And not only is a3 less useful than knight bd2, there's a question around whether that pawn would just be better on a2, because certainly after d5, which wasn't forced, but otherwise black could certainly consider taking on d4 and playing down the c-file. Black now played c4 in order to bring this knight back to its ideal square on c5, and it's notable that whereas in certain positions with the pawn on a2, white will be able to consider moves like b4, here b4 would just be a strategic disaster because the white pawn structure is ruined, and if the bishop takes on b3 and knight takes b3 would certainly be very comfortable for black. Not that black would be forced to play that, but so b4 isn't really an option, and instead play continued logically with knight d2, knight b7, knight f1, knight c5, and again we see a position where black is certainly more than comfortable. Could continue with, say, a5, maybe bring this rook to b8, b4 with very easy play on the queen side. But Hu Yifan decides to complicate the game somewhat by playing g4. And there's a question as to, for instance, if white were to play, say, knight g3, a5, and bishop e3, simple development like this, black is at least not worse, but I'm not sure how much better she is. Whereas after g4, the game becomes very much sharper. So after g4, it's possible that white was expecting black to play a move like a5, and white would play knight g3, and we'd get this kind of typical battle with white trying to play on the king side and black playing on the queen side. But Kosteniuk managed to respond very aggressively immediately with h5. And the problem is that white doesn't really have a very comfortable response to this. If, for instance, if she plays g5, knight h7, h4, then after a move like g6, black is ready to break with f6 at some point. When the white pawn structure begins to get undermined, this rook will be very active on the f file. The h4 pawn might be a weakness. White needs to watch out for bishop g4. So black has that active possibility. She can also just wait for a while, because she's still going to be better on the queen side probably after a5, rook b8, and b4. So this must have been what informed Hu's decision to play knight 3 to h2. But now after takes, black manages to establish a very comfortable position on the king side, as we'll see in a moment. So she played queen c8, f3, and then knight h7, preparing to bring this bishop out and trade it for its white counterpart, because with all of these white pawns on light squares, white has considerable dark square weaknesses, and the trade of bishops is going to accentuate those. So I played knight g3, bishop g5, knight f5, queen d8, king g2, and now g6. And it turns out that the knight on f5 is driven back, and after knight g3, king g7, black is now preparing to play her rook to h8. So rook h1, rook h8, knight f1, queen f6, bishop e3, and now the bishops are traded, knight g5, queen e2, rook h8, rook af1, and this move queen f4. So the queen is very aggressively placed there, and also can't be attacked for the moment because the knights don't have access to the e2 or g2 squares. Hu decided to trade rooks, but this allowed a small tactical shot with knight d3, which is very strong. So black has threats of knight takes b2, also ideas like queen takes f3 check it, and knight e1 check. So white felt compelled to take, but now after pawn takes, this d pawn is just enormously strong. Can't be taken in view of the weakness on f3, so queen d2, but now, or queen f2 rather, but now d2, knight g3, and here taking would be premature in view of the knight dropping, but knight takes f3 is extremely strong. Queen takes and bishop takes. So white can't take on g4 because black will end up queening. Taking on f4 will result in the knights being forked. So queen d2 or queen f2 was played, but now d1 takes, and we just have a position where black is a pawn up, but also retains all of the advantages of her position. So queen e1, bishop f3 check, king g1, f5, and after a few more moves, these kingside pawns proved too effective, and white resigned. So a very impressive game from Kosteniuk, especially given the competitive situation in which it arose, demonstrating a lot of black's key ideas, and in particular I think it's worth bearing in mind this idea of meeting g4 with an immediate h5 to try to contest kingside space.